So the issues are about, in terms of the supply chain, it's being able to rely on their ability to help us and hit the dates that we need. Sometimes we can't offer them the luxury of, you can take 3 weeks to do this, and I know it normally takes 4, but we need it in 2. We can't always do that, so it's really it's a management collaborative sort of process that we have. And then internally, the internal resource is, if we've got a machine breakdown or a small machine shop, we do have an escape route where most of the things we do, we've got somebody else outside that can do it. We might have to buy some more material, it depends what the nature of the breakdown is, if it caused some defects or scrap or something. And of course we've got labour issues, sickness, absence, holidays we've got to work around, which is one thing why I'm fairly close to putting the labour element into the scheduling, managing the time and attendance module really closely, so that if somebody's on holiday a week on Tuesday, the system needs to know.
Yeah.
Whereas before we might not have updated it until the day that he's on holiday, because it's not been used for anything.
Yeah.
But we need the scheduler to work around. Unlike machine maintenance, if we've got a machine down for a day, planned maintenance, you can tell the system, give the machine a holiday for a day.
Right.
So the scheduler works around it. Probably one of the bigger challenges we've got is about having all of the parts arriving on time. We do have some late supplies. Our OTIF score, as you'll hear today, I think is 80, as the customers would measure us.
Yeah.
And we do have enough data in terms of the missing element was always the quality score.
Okay.
We've now got a new quality engineer, and he's working wonders with our systems to help us do that. So the supplier scorecard should be fairly close.
Okay.
And my objective with that is to say, you've got some groupings of like suppliers who do like processing. So in other words, you compare foundry with foundry with foundry. So you're not trying to compare apples and pears.
Yeah.
So if you do some reasonable groupings, then in the business reviews to say, hey, you're third on our list of machining partners.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell them who the others are. Yeah. They know who they are. So that's the biggest challenge, as you'll hear in OTIF. 81 at the minute. Yeah. We've got an objective of getting to 95. When I first came last year, I thought it was mostly about defects found in components. Some defects you can find, often these are castings, you can find at goods receipt. Sometimes they're not visible, but you can see them when you start to machine it. Defects are revealed by. And sometimes they're not apparent until you do a pressure test and you've got some leaking, and it's because the casting is porous. And I formed the opinion a year ago that most of our problems with quality, I think we've turned a few of those things around, and it's more about timeliness. Well, then we have to alert the supplier, tell him to make another one, unless we've made a judgment that this can be repaired. Sometimes it happens, but sometimes it can't. So we have to do an unpicking job for the works order for that assembly to remove that component, and then get another one in and maybe get it machined again.
Yeah.
And replaced in the assembly.
We've
got, in terms of raw materials, because that's where it generally starts with timeliness, 6 people who would make the big castings. Then we've got another 6 who make smaller components, like the stems, collars.
Okay,
so the castings are usually like the main body.
The main body of the valve, and the other bits of the ancillary.
And then you've got like a bonnet, we call it a bonnet or a cover, what goes on the top. 6 for casting, 6 for bought out components, and then another 12 for subcontract services like machining, welding, the things that there's a large variety of components when there could be some commonising. So you might have 2 valves at very similar sizes, but some of the components inside could be the same. So you lose the benefit of having batch production. We might be making a one-off. We do a lot of one-offs. Unless it's something that with the sales and marketing guys we think, well, we're going to sell another 10 of these this year, so let's make 10. But of course, that's a critical judgment to make in terms of the inventory. But sometimes our supplier if he's got to change his setup just to do a one-off, he'll probably put it off because he'd rather do the next job for somebody else.
Yeah.
So it needs more skill at his level because, as you might imagine, if you're making a one-off, you don't really have a setup and then a cycle, a run. Your setup is making the one-off. Whereas if you've got a batch of 10 to make, you could have somebody doing the setup with a certain skill level, and you can then get somebody else to produce the quantity. And his pricing reflects that. Yes, we've embarked upon a sort of a lean campaign. We started with 5S, and you'll see when you walk around it's coming now in terms of the cleanliness and orderliness of the place. But we've done lots of small incremental changes to remove waste. So we've consolidated storage of certain things in certain places to prevent people having to look around and search for things. We've got tools on shadow boards, so the guys on assembly can pick a spanner. You don't have to go and look for one.
Yeah.
And they've all got them.
Okay.
So they don't pinch from each other.
Yeah.
Right, my vision when I joined Blackhall a year ago was to create what I call the Rolls Royce of valves. A clinically clean area with light grey painted floors, white walls, we've got white walls anyway, visual management, so we've got notice boards so that you can tell at a glance what's happening and what status jobs are.
Yeah.
People don't need to ask too many questions because everything they need to know about the job is there, so it's easy to locally manage.
Yeah.
Needs less supervisory input, some pretty slick workflow giving us shorter lead times. The lead times, as I mentioned earlier, are that we can control of the internal ones, so I want to reduce that week build time to having parts just in time 2 days before we need to go out the door rather than a week. Yeah. And once you've got the reliability that that's happening, then the inventory cost comes down. The one thing that I want to do is to work with the bigger suppliers. We've probably got half a dozen that we mostly rely on for the repeat work. Set up this supplier scorecard, have a bit more of a disciplined business review with them rather than it be just a chat just based on some metrics, and without having to threaten that, you know, if you go below this level you're under evaluation. We need to encourage them to get better with perhaps a bit more commitment in terms of long-term agreements. Right, we've got quite a lot in the West Yorkshire area, but there are two key players. One's in Wigan and one's in Sheffield. They're the two that make most of the bigger components and the ones that are more involved in our future growth. The place in Wigan, we probably contribute 20% to that. And the place in Sheffield, they've got two plants. We're probably only 10%. They're going to see the biggest growth in terms of the water sector.